Tom Hiddleston returns once again as Loki, but is he still burdened with glorious purpose? Find out when Johnnie Torch reviews Loki Season 2. Well, we are back with you live once again on another Johnnie Torch reviews. Today we are going to look at Loki Season 2, and I really enjoyed Season 1 of this series. I was surprised that I enjoyed it as much as I did because, honestly, I'm not a big fan of when they try to take a villain and build a movie, or in this case, a series around them. I'm never sure that it's going to work. Some villains are just a little too maniacal for their own good, and it doesn't really work. And other ones are anti heroes, and they're not really villains. Loki is sort of in the middle of that. He definitely is a schemer, he's the god of mischief. Is he really evil? That's kind of what the series was trying to determine for us. And again, just to briefly recap my thoughts on the first season, and of course, this is going to be a spoiler review. If you haven't seen the series yet, either season 1 or season 2, I would greatly recommend you go check them out first. But I was a big fan of season 1, and kind of the problem I have with season 2, we're going to start off right away here with the review, I suppose. But I kind of felt that you got the full arc with Loki in the first season. The first season opens up, and I did a review for season 1, so you can go back and listen to that. I should go back and listen to that because I'm curious to see exactly what I thought. But um, basically, what I remember is that the arc of Loki, they bring him to the TVA. Owen Wilson plays Mobius, who is a really fun character. I really enjoyed him. We'll talk about that in a moment too. But he's brought in sort of for being a time problem for the Bureau, for the timeline, and they kind of have to figure what they're going to do with him because he's caused havoc with the Tesseract, if you remember Endgame, and all the stuff that shenanigans that went on after that. So basically, the series spanned the arc of Loki turning from this scheming, you know, sort of maniacal villain to basically being a caring and empathetic creature that is worried about the effects of how the universe is going to implode under Kang, and in this case, a character called He Who Remains. So that's kind of the problem I have with this season, which is basically you already got the arc of Loki. Now, they had a very interesting and fun palette to work with in the first season because the first season was firmly, they were taking Loki back from the Avengers, where he was still a full fledged villain. He basically stabs his brother, literally. All the stuff about trying to take over Earth and using the Shatari. And so he was really at his worst place because, of course, during the progression of the MCU, we get to see him mellow a little. We see him soften around the edges. He does have some, you know, empathy for his family and so on and so forth. He's just a dubious character. He's not really trustworthy, but again, he kind of evolved out of that maniacal villain role. And the interesting thing with the Loki show in season 1, at least, was we got to see that over the course of whatever it was, half dozen episodes, we got to see him go through that progression again. And so instead of it feeling like we're going over well-trodden ground, it did feel like we got to see the character grow and expand and become empathetic. And it worked. Now, the problem I'm having with this season, though, is we've already got the arc. Now, when you already have a character go through the arc, it's kind of difficult to find something else for them to give them purpose, in other words. In this case, it would have to be that Loki was going to save the universe. Well, this season doesn't really get to that. It kind of plods on until the last episode. We already know that Loki is noble. We already kind of know. It's really basically only in the last episode that we wonder, is he going to regress back into, you know, sort of an unfeeling, unempathetic character, or is he going to make the noble sacrifice? Is he going to do what he has to do? Is he going to do what is better for him? Is he going to do what's better for his friends? Is he going to do what's better for the universe? But it feels like they could have done something like this in the final episode of season 1. Or maybe at the very most, you could give them another 2 or 3 episodes in season 1 and you would have gotten the resolution. This felt completely drawn out to me, and it was unnecessarily so. Now, part of the fun with the series to me in the first season was the characters. Loki, of course, played by Tom Hiddleston. Hiddleston is just pitch perfect. And I feel badly in a sense that when everybody talks about the MCU heavy hitters, and, everybody knows, nobody could play Iron Man like RDJ. Chris Evans was wonderful as Captain America. They were so perfectly cast. Chris Hemsworth, of course, is Thor. But they don't usually mention in the same breath Tom Hiddleston as Loki. And Tom Hiddleston has done more with this role than I honestly believe any other actor could do with it. He's given Loki all the different shadings. He's like the obnoxious little brother. He's the ambitious, brother in the Shakespearean sense. I think we got a lot of that in the original Thor movie, which is probably why it's my favorite of all the Thor slash, Loki Avengers projects that involve Loki. And so again, I can't stress how much he does with this role and how I enjoy him in this character. And I hope that he continues on in some form or other. We'll talk about the ending of this show being possibly the end of the series. Probably, at least from what I hear, there's probably not going to be a season 3. Not that it really needs it. It does have a very satisfying conclusion, but it does lead to some interesting questions on where Loki is going to wind up in the future. But we'll get to that momentarily. Part of the fun, like I said, of the first season was seeing the interactions between Tom Hiddleston and Owen Wilson as Mobius. Owen Wilson, I've said before, he was never really on my radar. I don't think I've ever really sat through a whole movie with Owen Wilson. I can't honestly say that I had any preconceived ideas what he would be like in the Marvel universe, but he really had a fun character in Mobius, and we get some glimpses of that during this season. But again, with the situation being what it is, and the stakes being as high as it is, it's a little bit difficult. A lot of people sort of, as is always the case on social media, we're sort of mocking the scene of Mobius and Loki talking over a key lime pie. And to me, those moments are really what works on the show, with the character moments. The plot is what it is. We'll get into that in a second. But the character moments are what are fun. And at another point in the series, Sylvie basically takes Mobius to task for that, because he's basically just he's born and bred for the job. And he's like, the most ambitious he gets beyond his job is, there's some great pie in the commissary. Let's go have that. And she's like, you're thinking of pie at a time like this? And it kind of goes to his character. And the show mostly embraces each character on their own this time. And I really miss the interaction with, a lot of Mobius and Loki interaction in the first season was really what was strong, in my opinion, was the character interactions. Another one is Sylvie. Now, I really liked Sylvie in the first season. I really loved that character. A lot of people were, doing this, the whole MCU thing, and is Sylvie, is trying to upstage Loki and this and that. But I thought she was a pivotal point in the series, because she basically is a loose cannon that forces Loki to be responsible. And that was what was great about that relationship. And you had the kind of semi weirdness of him being in love kind of with her, who was kind of him from another branch of reality, which made sense. I remember talking about that in the first season, but it it it, it feels like in this season Sylvie is very much more a dour character. You know what I mean? It was fun when she was, reckless and goes off half cocked, and Loki has to rein her in. In this case, she's kind of like just wants to crawl into a hole and disappear. And he kind of has to call on her a couple of times. And she still gets that kind of, bloodthirsty urge once in a while. But again, it feels like they're trying to draw out a story that was already completed the first time. Characters as well. Um, Ki Hui Kwan, I believe I'm saying his name right this time. Very enjoyable seeing him again in this, and he sort of functions as the I think what is typically referred to now as the guy in the chair. He's sort of the guy that's the computer whiz, so to speak. He knows all the problems and he's trying to figure them out, and he's written the book on the TVA, and he's an enjoyable character. But again, it feels like the way I described it on Twitter is it felt like the premise is the most elaborate math problem you've ever had. And some people have fun with that. Some people enjoy the challenge and they enjoy numbers and they enjoy trying to figure it out. I mean, I don't know anything about Sudoku or whatever those kind of games are, Wordy or something. Some people like those kind of puzzles. To me, after the second episode, I kind of just felt confused. I kind of just threw my hands up and was like, I kind of know what you're trying to say in this story. We've got to do something with the loom and the space and the time and the branches. And I kind of can follow you, but it's not very interesting and it's not very exciting. That's kind of the problem with this. It's much of it is Loki spinning his wheels, kind of knowing what he has to do, but not really going through with it until it's kind of the 11th hour and he realizes it's all on his shoulders. I don't really know what else to say. I mean, another character before we get to the full run to the story, Brad. I forget his designation. What was he? B9 or some kind of designation he had before that. He was a fun character. I really enjoyed him every minute he was on the screen. He's like a smarmy. What he reminded me of, I thought this was pretty funny, but the first thing he reminded me of is like Uncle Joey from Full House, if he was a villain, you know what I mean? And he's got a smarmy and goofy, but you know, and he's sort of the henchman to the villains in this. And honestly, I don't remember what happens to him. That's what I mean about how this show kind of just chugs along and does its thing, and it's not really that exciting because I was kind of wondering what was going to happen to him. I don't remember what happened to him. um the other character, and I'm forgetting her name now, she was a hunter, um Ruth's death or something weird like that, but anyway, she shows up again at the end after they deal with her. I didn't understand that either. They had her off in the future or something. Again, I'm not a time travel wonk. A lot of people try to get into the head of, whatever fictional physics that particular story has and tries to make sense of it. Is there a time ripple situation where you go back in time and it causes things to change in the future? Is it a stayed fixed timeline where you can't alter it? If you tried to alter it, you've actually created it, or you've helped to create it, or you didn't change whatever happens in the future. There's a lot of things that people like to get into that. I mean, to an extent I do too, but in this case it's really too dense to really have fun with, because basically the plot has Loki keep time slipping in and out of different periods. And again, it's something, it's like a power up for him by the end of the series. He's learned how to master time travel, and at least to the point of jumping back and forth through different periods. It's kind of, again, dense, to try to follow the rules of this, but suffice to say, he learns how to do it. Jonathan Majors, of course, plays Victor Timely, which I guess is an ode to Timely Comics, which is what Marvel used to be. And he plays it well. I really liked seeing his performance here. Of course, a lot of people are sort of taking him to task for what he may or may not have been guilty of in this lawsuit or whatever he has against him. Some people saying that it's even if he's innocent of that, he has other prior issues with co-stars and so forth. I don't know anything about that. Again, I stay away from that. I just go by the performance. I separate the art from the artist. That's the way I do it. And he was really good here. He was really, really very good. And he played two characters, basically. He plays Victor, and then he plays He Who Remains, which He Who Remains is a very fun character. He was the same, basically, in the last season, and they just pick up here. And, you know, the Victor version, I guess, he's supposed to become He Who Remains at some point. I couldn't follow that very well. Maybe a second viewing would help me, but again, if it takes a second viewing to really get the the plot going, the plot is kind of a mess. So the bottom line, and this is probably going to be a pretty quick review. I don't intend to go too much more than like a half hour with this review, but at the end of the day, Loki goes back to, and this was kind of amusing. I like when they do this. I think they did this. What was the show? I think they did this on The Flash, and I think they did this also on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., where there's like a certain loop that they have to go through the same day over and over again, and they have to sort of change something. It's sort of the Groundhog Day type thing, where they just go over the same thing over and over again, and they try to figure out what they did wrong. And this time they're going to say it this way, and this time they're going to move faster, and this time they're going to try this. And basically that's what happens with Loki. Now, I like that part. But the thing I don't like is whenever they try to cheat the rules. I think you can go back in time and relive a day or something like that. But basically, at one point, he has to get Obi, which is Ki Hoi Kwan's character. He has to get all his knowledge. And they said, basically, this will take you centuries to understand all this. And so he literally takes centuries to study all this stuff so that when he goes back the final time, it's second nature to him and he can just push the right buttons, throw the right switches, and it really isn't a problem. I think that's kind of cheating when you can take centuries to do something like that. I think that's too much of a reach, too much of an ask of the audience. But again, you know, your mileage may vary. Maybe that's just something that I dislike. But they could have just said, well, go back and I'll give you a 2-week, you know, and then if he has to take those 2 weeks again, take those 2 weeks again, or something like that. But just to say that he spent centuries studying whatever it is he had to do. So anyway, he does the study, he does the experiment, whatever it is, and it actually works this time, but it doesn't work because even though they did it right, it's a fixed point. It's another one of those cheats like Barry's mom on The Flash, where she's going to die no matter what. And if he ever does try to undo her death, it's going to ruin everything else in the cosmos because it's a fixed point and it has to stay. So in this case, it's the same thing, that the loom is never going to work. And reality is still going to be completely consumed. And basically, it's up to Loki to change all that. Now, all the other particulars like Mobius and I don't know what her name was, the black woman and the Latino guy. I don't know, Casey, I think his name was. They all are in different timelines where they were originally brought out of to work for the TVA. And, you know, Casey's a convict and the black woman is a doctor or something. And Mobius is selling jet skis and he has 2 kids. And basically Loki has to decide if, you know, and the kind of confusing thing to me is he knows that he kind of needs to bring them back in order to solve the problem, but at the same time he kind of spends a whole episode having Sylvie tell him, you're doing it out of selfish reasons, don't do it. So he decides not to do it. Then Sylvie comes back and says, well, everything is going to be destroyed if you don't do it. That's what I mean about how this season kind of felt like it's spinning its wheels for at least 4 episodes. I think this could have been, like I said, take 2 episodes, and jam them together at the end of season 1, and you've had a really good season. The rest of the season was not really necessary. So at the end of the day, Loki needs to decide what he's going to do. He goes back to He Who Remains, and he basically tells him, look, He Who Remains tells him, look, I knew this was going to happen. You think I'd let her kill me? Because, of course, Sylvie kills him at the end of the first season. He says, see you soon. So it was always going to play out this way, that he was going to have to go back and prevent her from killing him, or suffer the consequences of the universe being destroyed. So Loki is at an impasse now where he's trying to find a way to stop Sylvie from killing He Who Remains. And Sylvie basically says that you'll have to kill me to stop me. And he takes whatever it is, 3,000 shots at stopping her from killing him. And it doesn't work. She always ends up killing He Who Remains. So basically, the dilemma, when we finally get to the horns of the dilemma, this is what we're building up to through this whole season, is Loki going to kill Sylvie? Because basically that's the only way to stop, because He Who Remains basically is the guy keeping both hands on the wheel of time and space and whatever. And it's sort of a subtext here, as it was at the end of last season, where what is more important, free will, or are you going to have somebody play with the levers and make sure things go a certain way? That kind of stuff I'm not too crazy about. I mean, I think they handled it a little bit better last season, but to say that there has to be somebody there that guides the free will, I mean, that's God. You know what I mean? It's, from my perspective anyway, kind of a weird thing to try to say that there's a man that the controls He Who Remains that does all this. Whether this is supposed to be Loki, whether this is supposed to be Kang, I don't really know. This He Who Remains character is a version of Kang, but apparently this is not the Kang that's going to be Kang the Conqueror, because also there was a Kang that was in Ant-Man 3, Quantumania, that wasn't really the real default Kang. Again, confusing stuff. More confusing than it needs to be, but such is the multiverse. All right, so basically the dilemma is Loki going to kill Sylvie? You kind of figure, well, he's a an anti-hero. He'll do what needs to be done. He's not really going to be that soft not to kill Sylvie, but he can't bring himself to kill Sylvie, and it's understandable because now he's a hero. I was hoping they were going to do this, and I fully expected them not to, but they eschew the Man of Steel route, which is you've got to do what you got to do when you got to do it, and you got to kill Zod, then you got to kill Zod. And to their credit, they circumvented that. They didn't really go through that, which I thought they would, which would have him kill Sylvie, because he's capable of it. Let's be honest. He tried to kill Thor. It's his own brother. I mean, there really was potential there for him to do this, but he doesn't. He goes back in time and talks to Mobius from when they first met, and Mobius basically tells him that, it's basically pick your burden. There's never an easy answer. There's never an easy way out. And so Loki eventually picks the burden that he will place upon himself, and he decides to go out there instead of letting Timely do it, and he takes all the branches that are being wildly, electric, that are destroying the world or the universe or whatever, and he takes them and fashions them into a tree. Now, this was really interesting because if anybody knows, in the original comics, and I'm sure it's in the mythology somewhere, that Loki is imprisoned in a tree, and basically when he's released from the tree is when it begins his malevolent run of causing mischief and so forth. In this case, it's brought in at the end of his run, and he is no longer mischievous, but now he is the Time Lord, so to speak, to borrow some Doctor Who jargon, I suppose. And he's bringing the branches together and encircling himself in the tree. And it kind of reminded me of sort of the Red Skull in the Endgame, Infinity War stuff, where he's sort of like trapped now into being the guardian of one of these things. That's sort of like a Marvel thing, an MCU thing, where they're always doing this. And again, it works because Loki's finally reached that level now where he is selfless, when he was the epitome of selfish. So it's a great character arc, but like I said, I I just felt like this season was too long and dragged out. You really didn't need most of it. Most of it really wasn't that much fun. I mean, you had some interesting moments here and there, but again, it could have been condensed into like 2 episodes. 2-hour episodes would probably do this series what needed to be done. And again, I hope going forward we're going to see Loki, and I'm probably sure we will. I'm pretty sure we will see him show up in some Avengers project or something, because I really think you need to see Loki and Thor together again before it's over. Because as far as we know, I think Thor thinks that Loki's dead. Um the last we saw of him was what, in Infinity War, the last time we saw them together. And a lot has transpired since then for both of them. And I would like to see them both together before it's all over for Hiddleston and Hemsworth. That they would be, that they would be getting along again, like they apparently were at the beginning of the Thor movie. There didn't seem to be too much animosity between them. Just some hints of rivalry for Thor with Loki. All right, so that about does it. Again, a middling review. I mean, I don't know what I would say. I probably will say that this is. We didn't even mention Miss Minutes, who again is like, it's confusing. She's a malevolent character at some point. Then she goes back to being a sort of servile character. I wasn't sure what was going on with her either. I'm going to give this one. I'm going to have to give it 2.5 stars out of 5. I'm giving it an extra half a point because I think it was done well, but I think most of it was unnecessary. Honestly, I mean, I I was going to, if I had the time, which I didn't, watch the season 1 again. I'm anxious to sit through season 1 again. I thought it was pretty good. This season, like I said, watch the first episode, watch the last episode. You probably get the general idea all the way through. That's kind of all you need. See, episodes 1 and 2 and episode 6. That's kind of all you need. The rest of it was dragging and padding out a story that didn't need to be, at least in my opinion. Let me know what you think in the comments below. So 2.5 stars out of 5. That would be maybe 5.5 out of 10. And that would be maybe a C minus. Maybe a C minus. Some good performances, but again, not enough of them to really carry the water for the show. So, okay, that's about it. And let me know what you think in the comments below. Let me know what you think about Loki season 2. Let me know what you think about Loki in the future. What are we going to do from here with the character? Do you see a future for him, or is this kind of the end of the road for Hiddleston's Loki? Let me know what you think. I'm sure there's some interesting speculation going on out there about his future. All right, and so until next we meet, this is Johnny Torch reminding you once again, keep the flame burning brightly, and I'll be with you again real soon.